Okay, we're ready to start our final painting. And so this is going to be a demonstrate on two basic approaches to starting your painting, okay? So I got everything I need here. I got my paper towel, I got my pencil, got my brushes, got my palette, got my water, got my paint, got my reference pictures, and I got my 12 by 16 piece of paper, okay? Now my paint hasn't been messed with in a while. It's fairly dry. There's not really much I can do with that. I could re-wet it maybe and kind of work into it, but I'm just gonna just pour a little bit more fresh paint right on top and just use that. Wipe the paint off the edge. Some black paint. Wipe off the edge on that. Set my paint out of the way. All right. So this is the picture I've chosen to work with. Okay. Now for you on the Google Drive, all these pictures are available on the Google Drive. Okay. You got all these choices from which you can pick from to do your painting. Okay. You decide. It's your choice, whichever one you want to use. Okay. So to start this, for either method that I use, I'm going to tone the paper regardless, okay? So this is where if your brush pack that you got, the type of brushes you got, you had a big brush, this is where that would come in handy, okay? Now remember, with toning the ground, if you have a milky consistency of paint, it'll spread much better, okay? Now, if I look at my picture and I try to decide which value I want to put in my picture, I think I'm just going to put in like a mid value. You know, a mid value shows up a lot through this picture. So something about like this sky blue value, what that is in black and white. Okay, I think I'm going to do that. So let's see if I can mix up a big batch of that. It's going to take quite a bit. So remember, black will overpower white as far as mixing goes to make a gray. So it needs to be mostly white. I'm scooping up a good portion of this paint, putting it over here, right? Now I'm going to take it a little bit of a time. I'm going to take, a little bit of black and try that first to see where that gets me. That might be just a little too much. But like I said, black will overpower it. So let me just mix that in. I want to be precautious. I can add more black if it needs to get darker. And let's see how I feel about this gray once it's mixed in. I feel like I'm maybe go just a tad bit darker. So that was about 70% white and only 30% black. Might have been more like 80% to 20%. I think it was probably more like that. So hopefully that would dry a little bit lighter than what it is. Now this isn't milky yet. Now is that enough to cover this entire paper? I'm not really sure. So let me just go ahead and add a little bit more white. Now there's a big piece of paper we got to cover. And it's really going to soak up the paint. And that's why I want to add so much water to it. It'll extend it, make it last longer across the surface. when it's thick like this, it just isn't going to spread very far. You notice quite a bit of paint. I'm really getting it spread out though. See if I can get everything piled back up into a pile. And my brush has soaked up a lot of the paint. There's not much paint left here. So let me, as far as what's there, from what it looked like I was beginning with, it's kind of gotten spread all over, so I gotta be careful with it. A lot of it's in the brush. So I'm gonna take some water, fully drench my brush and bring it over here. See if I can push this paint back into a pile. Dip my brush one more time. And that might be enough. One more time. To cover the whole paper. So that's quite a bit of paint there. Okay. Now if you only have a brush that's, say, this big, you're going to have a challenge ahead to try to spread it all over. Okay. So it's pretty good when you got a big brush like this. We won't use this big brush regularly, but for something like this, it would be good. So I'm going to kind of start, it's good not to start at the edge because a lot of your paint's going to go right there. You can start somewhere kind of out in the paper and work your way out to the edge. It's just a better way to work. I better extend this just a little bit more because that is going to take a lot of paint. I'm just feeling like I need to add more paint to it. Because I'd rather have a little bit more paint left over than not enough and then have to remix. Now this should do it. Dip it one more time. Okay, so look at all that. Got a lot of paint there, which I can use spread across the surface. All right, let's see what we can do. Now you could get a little paint on your table there, so just gotta be aware of that, but it cleans up pretty good with water. You could even dip your brush in water, potentially, and add to it like this just to spread out a little bit more, but it could potentially get a little too thin, so you gotta be careful with that. So already we've covered a pretty good portion of this paper. Turn it this way if I need to. Already used up a good amount of paint. We'll see if I make it. All right, I got it covered. Table got a little dirty. Okay. All right, so yeah, let's gotta let that kind of dry. As you can see, I used up a good bit of that, and I did end up dipping my brush several more times, and so it got pretty watery. Okay, milky, I guess you say, right? I used up a good portion of that. Oh, black's starting to get rid of my white there. All right, so as you see, this is already starting to dry. It's put on really thin, therefore it'll probably dry pretty quick. So I'm pretty much done with this brush. So I'm just going to stick it into the water for now. Now, the two different approaches in terms of doing this is one where you might use a pencil, all right, typically to kind of draw things. Now, we've already kind of covered kind of gesture a little bit and tone and value in terms of doing studies and how to do gesture and just kind of lay things out, right, a little bit, you know, on a small scale, really small. Well, now we're doing a really big picture, right? So it really helps to begin with is really lay out the main shapes. So we got this big main shape here, we got this big main shape here, and we got a little bit of this off in the distance, and the way the river kind of hooks around right there a little bit. And then got these little rocks and little rapids through here, and this little bank over here of rocks. So, you know, we got some things in there we can deal with, some like large areas that we could kind of designate first. Now, this thing has a real kind of almost like a linear perspective, 1 point perspective thing going on where, you know, things are kind of going out this way on either side. And that kind of happens with 1 point perspective, like if you're looking down a hallway or a street. So, so that's kind of there. So we kind of got the clouds there too that we can work with and in terms of maybe designate their shapes a little bit. But we're going to approach this in two different manners, where one side is going to be more or less just kind of working in with pencil, and one side just working in with paint. So a lot of artists, they don't go with pencil approach. They don't kind of spend time drawing in pencil to kind of get their painting started. They'll just start with paint. So they'll kind of lay in some like kind of general marks of where things are at, and then kind of just take it from there. So that's more of a painterly approach versus more of a precision drawing approach, I guess you could say. So whichever way works best for you, or whichever way you want to approach it, would be fine. So, but just know it's best to work from large to small. Work from the large shapes down to the smaller shapes, okay? In terms of what you focus on. And now consider this to be sort of a large shape. These to be, this whole row of rocks right here to be sort of one rock kind of generalized area. And then broken up into smaller shapes. So let's see how this is drying. Maybe I can wave on this a little bit. Maybe it'll dry a little faster. I might just start with the paintbrush approach first, just because I wouldn't have to wait till it all dries. But with the pencil, I do really kind of need to let this dry, because pencil just, afraid with that sharp point, would kind of tear into the wet paper. Okay, I think that might be good enough. And when you draw on this with pencil, it does erase pretty good because it has this kind of rough textured surface. So I said I was going to split this in half. So I'm going to say that's about split in half. And I'll just go and do that on here. Okay. So let's say on this side I'm going to use pencil. I'll go ahead and do a little bit of that over here. So going to be a little difficult because this does go way down there. Maybe I'll go down a little bit. So I just want to capture this shape. This is called a negative shape. Okay, this is sort of the area that's in between here, this shape right here. So I'm looking at that as I draw this. Now notice I'm just doing this without doing all of this, right? Just kind of get that designated first. You can't even hardly see that line. That's fine because they're going to get painted over. And I don't want it to stand out. So I just want some generalization of where this is like an implied line almost. It's almost an implied shape in terms of there being a line that goes across there. So, but eventually, I don't want that. I want it to be kind of these individual little trees kind of coming through there. So anyway, it's just getting a layout. So if this is halfway, right here, between here and here, the top and bottom, this is halfway. So that would be about right here. So let's say that comes down kind of like this. Then off the page, kind of like that. Right? Okay. All right, and then these rocks kind of like through here. I'm going to kind of do something kind of generalized, kind of rough right there, okay? Just kind of indicate that a little bit. And that goes off about from here to here, about right here. So we're going to say about right there. Okay? All right, so now we could look at a little bit of detail because we got this main shape in there. We divided this areas. These are the main division of this area. So what goes in those areas. So I'm going to spend a little time. I might could do just a little bit of kind of gesture kind of stuff. In terms of where these things are at. Not getting a lot of detail, just kind of placement is all that matters. I don't think I'm doing too good on placement. Kind of took away a little paint right there. That's all right. Just don't let it dry all the way, really. I'll erase a little lighter. Okay, so I'm just indicating sort of where the tops of these trees are. That's all I'm doing. I'm not trying to go into detail. So this cloud kind of comes up through here. Okay, clouds are in. This is a pretty important little part here. Kind of really seems to stand out. Now, I know there's a lot through here, and I'm only going to do basic indicators. That's all. Like this rock right here is kind of that right there. I feel like if I can divide up this space a little bit, maybe get some indication of things in here without spending too much time on it. Remember, I'm using my finger to point. This is where I'm drawing. This is what I'm looking at. Let me make sure and get down here before I get my spacing off here a little bit. So this down something like that, and comes back, comes up. A lot going on right there, a lot of little shapes. Don't want to get all caught up in that right now. Just doing these main kind of big shapes. Definitely can get lost in all this. So almost, I just really don't want to spend a lot of time just drawing it all out because I'm going to have to paint it all. And right now I'm just trying to get a basic layout of things. Okay. Those are some big main shapes. You can't really see that because that light, the way it's reflecting. Okay, I don't really feel much sense or need to go in here and describe all this without getting into the paint. Okay, I feel like some of these big main shapes are really, if I get those, that, if all these other little, particular little things, I could probably get by with sort of guessing at those or sort of making something up similar. Or if I really should spend some time doing these shapes, though, these bigger ones, right? Okay, so there's this one and this one too. All right, and so now I could indicate maybe just a little bit of water in terms of, just in terms of where some of this white water is. Okay. Now notice I didn't really use any value. I could go in with some value in there. Um, but really there's no need to. Just better off just painting it in there. Okay. So I have just some bare minimum kind of contours that I could work with and just go in and start kind of painting that. Okay. I've really kind of indicated where these trees are, and then I have to kind of paint, in between those two to bring those out. So there's more of it, in terms of this stuff down to here. I just didn't want to spend all that time doing that because this is really important in terms of where these are at the height, the space in between, and so forth. Okay, then all this in between down here, I'll just kind of paint that. Okay. All right, so I'll start that approach in just a minute, but I want to come over here and start the second approach. Okay, it's going to be a bit different. This approach, I'm putting the pencil down. Okay. Find a good brush to start with. I like that one. I think that one. Don't really have very many good pointy brushes. Guess that'll work. When it gets wet, it'll get down to more of a point. Alright, so I think I'm going to start off with something light, just to kind of indicate kind of roughly where the clouds are. And then I'm going to start with something kind of dark, just to roughly indicate where the trees are. Maybe something a little lighter in these areas. And then something to indicate sort of this value. So probably get darker in here. So now I'm almost doing like a value study. Kind of like we did when we were doing the small pencil value studies. Now, except now I'm going to do it with paint. Okay? Almost the same way. Okay? So now I'm going to start with trying to indicate a little bit of this and do it roughly, like a sketch. And this is called kind of like blocking it in. Okay? I'm just giving a rough indication where things are at without overly kind of defining things. So I think first I do need to kind of do what I did here kind of with paint though. Let's get, I mean what I did with pencil over here. So let me kind of indicate where these trees are. Now this comes down to here. This kind of comes up through here. This comes over here. So I'm kind of starting kind of contour like. Something using paint and a brush. Okay, so I kind of indicated kind of where those trees are in terms of the tops are, very roughly, right? So maybe I can go in here and indicate a little bit more where some of these darks are, just as in here. I'm starting to squint my eyes just like we did when we did those value studies. Now see, this is starting to get beyond just doing a contour, right? I really am like painting now. I really am pretty much sort of really blocking things in, right? In terms of these value areas. But I'm doing it in a very sketchy, rough kind of manner, of which later I will start to refine. Hmm. So I kind of have some different values going on now. I got this really dark. I got this sort of medium value right here, which I'm using to kind of go in and place things. I can go in later and, refine all this. The intention is I'm going to go back and refine all this. This by no means is what the final look is going to look like. If you recall back to that squinting, that's kind of what I'm doing right now. Placement got off on things a little bit. I can always go back and kind of paint over things a little bit to kind of move things around. Okay, so moving right along, notice how much I have now indicated versus this. You know, I mean, you could approach it either way. I mean, and so I'll get into approaching this in just a minute. I'm still working on laying this out. So this is kind of like a quick value study in a way of what this is. So just going to continue. Okay. So now I'm ready to start on kind of indicating some of the water. I feel like the white probably be my best place to start for the moment. I'm starting to get some paint on my paper here, on my reference. So really I need to get some whites. I need to clean this off a bit. Now this white slab will change a little bit too as we go. I'm using a little dry brushing here too. Some of that black or gray that was on the brush starting to work its way into it. Okay, so that is basically just a start. That. Okay. Guess now I need to do this and then some clouds too. Now, honestly, I probably ought to might have started with the clouds first because they got to come down in here, but it'll be okay. Alright, so a little bit more to do over here. Alright, so maybe a little bit of dark down in here. I got a little too dark. Just trying to indicate a little bit of dark in the water through here. Just some wasn't in there, and maybe a little bit dark. So over here. Hmm. Okay. Alright. So, very rough beginning of a painting. Okay. Where I'm sort of blocking things in. Versus this. Where you're starting everything off in pencil and kind of indicating shapes. So you really have no value or anything up here, but you have indicators of where things are at. If you feel more comfortable, start your painting like this. That's fine. That probably is where most students would feel best, because really you have to be able to draw in order to do this. Because everything I'm looking at over here, I'm placing these values in places in relation to what's there, right? All the lights that are there and all the darks that are there are related to what I've seen, okay? So if you're not good at like placing things in relation to one another, which is what drawing is, in terms of their size and placement, then yeah, as far as paint goes, you might be better off more with this approach versus this approach, okay? So whichever works best for you, okay? Two different approaches to how to begin or start a painting, okay? Whereas I feel like on this side, you now have everything in the right place and you just now got to finish and refine everything. This side, you really don't have a beginning quite like this. You'll probably start with the sky and paint in these clouds and paint the sky, then paint the trees, and then work your way to the rocks. And because most of the time you work from back to front, so this is further off in the distance, it goes behind the trees, and the trees are in front of the sky. And then as you come down, all this is kind of closer to you, and then this is further back. So it makes sense to kind of work your way down the layers. So those are two different starts, and we'll just kind of go from there. Okay?